Good afternoon. We will call the meeting of the New Ulm Planning Commission to order. It's 4:30 p.m. Thursday, August 29th. Item 2 on the agenda would be to approve the minutes from the July 25th meeting.
I'll move it.
Second.
Got a motion and a second approving the minutes as presented. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Item 3.1, consider the application of Jim Sheeman requesting the following variances for the property located at 1106 North Spring Street, legally described as part of lots 12, 13, and block 11 north of Center Street, Item 1, to allow the location of an accessory structure without a permitted use on the property. Item 2, to allow front yard setback of 20 feet. And item 3, to allow the rear yard setback of 5 feet.
Okay, maybe before we get started, I'd just like to note that all of the reports that you're receiving today, we're using a different format. And so one of the things you'll note is that the type size is reduced, and we've added some additional information to assist you, with your review. If there is information that is missing that you would like to see on the reports, we would welcome your input on that. If you would like the reports formatted differently, we certainly can do that as well. So this is kind of a step to standardize our report forms. The other thing I would note is that in doing this, there are mistakes that were made in the process, so you might see things just a little bit out of order, or the incorrect information might be provided in some lines. We will advise you of that as we proceed with the reports.
Okay,
All right.
go on to the Sheeman issue.
Sure. So for a little background on this variance, the land use designation in this area is low-density residential. Surrounding the area is low-density residential to the northwest, west, and south, and then industry to the northeast across the railroad tracks. It's currently zoned R2, single and two-family residential district. The surrounding zoning is R2 to the south and west, I1 planned industrial to the north, I2 general industrial to the east. Currently, the site is vacant. There are no structures on the property. So for a little description about the project, the first part of the variance is to request or to allow the construction of a private storage shed on a property without a permitted use being present. So currently city code permits garages in residential zones only as an accessory structure or an accessory use to a residence. Private garages in residential areas on vacant land are not a permitted use. And there are currently, like I said before, no permitted structures on Mr. Sheeman's property. There are, though, several private storage buildings and garages on lots without a permitted use in the general area of Mr. Sheeman's property. And variances have been granted to place these structures on properties without a permitted use being present in New Ulm. Now, regarding the setback reductions being requested, Mr. Sheeman is asking that the building be placed 20 feet from the front property line and then 5 feet from the rear property line. So the railroad right-of-way runs along the entire east property line of this property we're describing and greatly reduces the buildable area of those lots. Our city code requires that we have a front yard setback of 30 feet in this zoning district, and then a rear yard setback of not less than 20% of the depth of the property. So for this site, that would be that requirement would be around 13.5 feet. So, but that railroad plays a pretty large role, and as it curves, it also creates a curve in the lot, and makes the lot an unusual shape, more of a triangular shape. So the lots that are being proposed to have construction on them, lots 12 and 13, have a reduced depth, and also since the railroad cuts through the middle of these lots, only a small portion is Mr. Sheeman's property. The actual remainder of the lots is on the east side of the railroad track and owned by a different property owner and is in a different zoning district. So staff, excuse me, as far as recommendations here, staff would recommend approval of these three variances for the following reasons. One, the lots are unusual in shape and size and do not provide sufficient space for a single or two-family home. The property is located off an unimproved street, so there's a gravel street that is running adjacent to the property, and there are currently no plans to improve that street at this point in time. Those lots have remained undeveloped for many years, and staff is not aware of any interest, or there hasn't been any interest in developing those lots that we're aware of. There are a number of other storage sheds in the area on properties that do not have a permitted use on them. And the applicant did not create a hardship, did not create this hardship. That hardship was created when the railroad cut through those lots and made them smaller and odd-shaped. We also would recommend two conditions. One being that the size of the structure shall not exceed 1,000 square feet. And then two, the applicant locate the boundaries of the property and verify those boundaries before the shed is placed. There are a number of attachments. We have the variance application. We also have a site location map and aerial photo. You can see that property and its unusual shape. We have a zoning map. And then we also have a map showing where Mr. Sheeman would like to place that shed. We have some site photos showing that site. And then lastly, attachment number 6. So the city's land use regulations provide standards to evaluate a variance request. And the following, there are 6 questions that we should consider, or we should be answering when we receive a variance like this. And on attachment number 6, those are listed.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so anyone that wishes to speak on the matter would please step up to the microphone, state your name and address. And again, it's a public hearing. Did we have any written requests or anything submitted?
No.
Looks like we have no one that wishes to speak, so we'll close the public hearing and move forward to take any action you wish.
Excuse me for a second, does that mean, do you want me to speak here, or I'm just like here?
It's an option to you. It's a public hearing. You can either speak or not speak.
8% is perfectly, so
Okay.
make your decision. Am I free to go?
You're free to do anything you wish, sir.
You don't get anything out of me?
We're gonna have some discussion, but that's up to you if you wanna listen or
Well, I'll
not.
listen to your discussion.
No one's made a motion yet.
I think this is a no-brainer unless the railroad moves. I make a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the city conditions.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, approving the motion with the conditions presented by the staff. Is there any further discussion?
Does the recommendations under the motion include the 20-foot and the 5-foot setbacks as part of the agreement?
All three,
All three?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. And my only follow-up question is, Mr. Sheeman, you're aware of the 1,000 square feet and a 16-foot height?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, and this will go to the city council on September
Third.
3rd, 4:30.
Thank you. Yeah.
It wasn't too painful, was it?
No, no, that's simple. Yeah.
Excuse my voice today, folks. Item 3.2 is also a public hearing. Consider the application of Virginia Sucre Molden requesting an interim use permit to allow the operation of a float tank therapy business in a residence located at 1010 South Ridge Road and legally described as Lot 3, Block 1, Lombrex 3rd Edition.
Okay. For a little bit of background, the land use designation in this area is low-density residential. The zoning designation is R1, the single-family residence district. Current land uses in that area would include single-family residences and then Nels Park to the west. Notice has been provided to property owners within 350 feet of the subject property. And it's also been noticed in the New Ulm Journal. Interim use permits are regulated under section 9.22 of the city code. I have attached as attachment number 2 the review criteria for granting an interim use permit. And the city code currently does allow home occupations in the R1 zoning district if a conditional use permit is granted by the city. Due to the planned short duration of the business operating out of the residence, that is the reason for seeking an interim use permit versus a conditional use permit. On the property is a single-family dwelling with a garage, and the business where the float tanks would be located would be on the east side of the house in an attached four-season porch. The business would consist of one flotation pod, which could serve up to 3 clients per day. And the float tank can only accommodate 1 client per session. There is adequate parking on the existing driveway on this property for the clients. They are requesting that this interim use be granted for a period of 3 years. Business would operate from 7 to 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday, and we also included as an attachment number 3, a narrative provided by the applicant of what the business operation is and how it actually works with her clients. With this one, staff would recommend approval of this interim use permit for the following reasons. The application does indeed comply with section 9.22, which are our interim use permit review criteria. We do not see that this would likely impact surrounding properties based on the number of clients per day. The nature of the use is intended to be quiet space for the clients, so no excess noise. And the business will take place entirely within the existing residence. And there is no plans for additions or anything like that to be added on to suit the business. There are 5 recommendations that we would recommend. One is that the applicant agrees and signs a consent agreement with the City of New Ulm, that the interim use be issued for a period of 3 years, that the business operation will not generate noise that violates section 8.08 of the city code. Customer parking will take place on the applicant's property, and the applicant will pay the cost to record the permit consent agreement with Brown County Recorder's Office. The attachments show the interim use permit application. Like I said, I have the interim use review criteria also attached as attachment number 2. Attachment number 3 is the narrative of the business provided by the applicant. Attachment number 4 gives you an overview of where the property is located. As you can see, Nels Park is kind of to the south and west. You can see the zoning map in attachment number 5. Attachment number 6 shows the location of where this business would take place within the residence. It is on the first level of the home. And we've also been informed that that room is entirely soundproofed as well. And attachment number 7 is a photo from the street showing where the room is going, or the business is going to take place, in the back corner of the house.
I might note that after the agenda was sent out, we did receive a communication on this request, which I would like to read into the record.
Okay.
It's dated August 26, 2019, still Community Development Director Dave Schnobreck. Subject is Virginia Suckermolden Business Permit. We are against allowing this business in our neighborhood. Number 1, extra traffic. Number 2, where will cars park? Number 3, Suckermolden residence is located on a curve in the street, and cars parked along the curve create a hazard, as you can't see oncoming traffic. Number 4, want to keep our quiet residential neighborhood. Number 5, this area is zoned residential, not for business. It's signed by Paul and Colleen Bernick, 1017 South Ridge Road, New Ulm, Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, again, this is a public hearing, so anyone that wishes to speak on this matter, please step to the microphone, state your name and address, and
Gosh, I've been at this mic quite a few times. Feels like a little bit of deja vu coming back. I have not a lot to say because I think that you have the information in front of you about what I'm interested in doing. What I am here for is just to answer any questions and to explain that the reason for the interim use of the permit is because when we were intending to start this business, the idea was that we wanted to be doing this on a storefront level. We were looking at businesses downtown. We were surprised by the opportunity to buy part of a business from Mankato, and it was a matter of time to make it happen. There's also the opportunity to educate people of New Ulm about floating and what it means. And that's not that feasible to do when you're charging $75 an hour. So we were excited about the opportunity to do it in our home, to teach people about the health benefits of floating without any cost to anybody. Just to, make everybody understand, get comfortable with our neighbors, and understand if it's something that we want to invest in long term and make a purchase or a rental, in the business district. So that is the reason that we are in our home instead of downtown, with the goal of looking forward to just essentially studying the reaction and how busy we are, and if it's going to be a good economic decision. May I answer any questions?
you're fully aware of the interim request rather than
I am.
the 3-year time frame on it?
Yes, John's helped me with that. My goal would be that 3 years would be almost extensive for what we need, but that's not something I'd be ready to guarantee. I'm still learning about the reactions of a small community that's has not been exposed to this. The closest float tank has always been Mankato. After that, it's Albert Lee, and the rest is Minneapolis. They're starting to expand quickly, and they're starting to open in places, but people still are learning about them. And I'm interested in judging the reaction to our possible clients.
Do you have a reaction to the concerns of the neighbor?
I'm a little surprised. I did try to speak to most of the neighbors that I knew. In fact, we've let some of our neighbors float this week, and it's been one of the most eye-opening. I know more about my neighbors now than I used to, so that was special. No, I'm not concerned about the parking. I'm not concerned about the traffic. I'm concerned about traffic in our neighborhood in general, you know, with the curve that is reasonable. But we are not expecting more than 2 to 3 cars that will be coming just to park in our driveway a day. And these people are coming for health benefits and calming, and, you know, I think it can only add a little bit of serenity and character to our neighborhood.
So it would be 1 to 2 cars at a time, right?
No,
is what you would
at one
expect.
time there would only be one. Because in between clients, there is the matter of a half hour to address the tank, clean it, warm it back up, get it ready to go. So it's not, they don't overlap.
How long are the clients in the tank? An hour?
Usually 90 minutes.
Okay, hour and a
There
half,
is 60-minute options. The studies, the more scientific studies that are done on it say that 90 minutes is more beneficial, because at about 40 minutes is when you get your optimum, like, reaction to being devoid of any type of stimulus and total relaxation. So that the extra 30 minutes on top of 60 is considered what is the most ideal. However, it is a little intimidating for new floaters. 90 minutes sounds like a very long time to commit yourself to being alone and quiet in a dark space. So we offer both.
Are you anticipating, from a marketing standpoint, using any signage or advertising on your property?
Currently, the only signage I would consider doing is painting my mailbox. I think I'm going to paint it blue. And that's it. That'll be an easy way for them to say, you know, go to the blue mailbox. Because I understand that signage is kind of tricky in town, and I don't really want to put our name on the front of our house. It is still my house, and I want to keep it that way. I have 2 little girls who are excited to help, and they're very proud to help, but we want to keep it, you know, a residential space also.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on this matter? If not, then we will close the public hearing on this matter and move forward.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'd make a motion to recommend approval.
Second.
With the recommendations?
Yes, as noted in the
Yes.
attachments.
Okay, we have a motion and a second with the recommendations that go with it. Any further discussion?
I do live up in the neighborhood, and I don't see no problem with this whatsoever. So with that, I just ain't gonna be voting. I'm just gonna abstain from voting.
Okay.
Did you want to invite the whole planning commission up for a trial? I've been following it on Facebook. I think it's gonna. I would think it's gonna go over good. I just been following you on Facebook because you've been going through it, and it's exciting and interesting.
Well, I appreciate hearing the feedback.
And I wasn't one of the neighbors that went swimming.
Yeah.
I see you walk by every day. One of these days I'm gonna go out there and sit for a while.
Okay, back on. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Again, this will go to the city council, excuse me, on September 3rd, 4:30.
Is that something you recommend that I should be at?
I would always recommend anybody that comes to here to go to the city council in case there's any concerns. The best source is the people making the request, so.
Okay, that sounds great. I will be there, and you all have my contact information. If anybody wants to see the space or learn more about it, please reach out.
We do have a commissioner on this, here that is a counselor that is also takes all of these things for us to the council, so. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Moving on then to 3.3. Consider the application of Arlen and Susan Bonney requesting the following approvals for the property located at 1703 South Minnesota Street and legally described as Lot 14, Block 48, south of Center Street. Item 1, that the property be rezoned from I-1 General District, Industrial District to R3, Multiple Family Residence District. And item 2, that the comprehensive plan for the city of New Ulm be amended to permit high-density residential land uses in place of industrial land uses in plot. Again, this is a public hearing, so anyone that wishes to speak on the matter, or would
Okay.
you want to go first? Go ahead.
We'll start with the staff report.
Gotta
I
have
might
this.
note that in the report, we also refer to the bodies as the petitioners. So the term applicant and petitioner gets kind of used interchangeably. I would note that we have a deadline for making a decision on this matter of September 27, 2019. That's a 60-day rule that's in effect by state statute. The land use designation, as was indicated, is industry. The requested is high-density residential. Surrounding comprehensive planned land uses to the north is high-density residential, to the west business, to the south industry, and to the east industry. The zoning designation is currently as I-2, and I should note that when the petitioners purchased the property, that's what the zoning classification was. They've requested that it be changed to R3. Surrounding zoning, to the north, it's R3, to the west, it's B2, to the south, it's I2, and to the east, it's I2. The site is currently vacant. Area land uses, to the north, we have duplexes and single-family dwellings. To the west, we have businesses, McDonald's, Acre, and Clark. And then to the south and east, we have storage buildings. Notice of the public hearing has been provided to property owners within 350 feet of the subject property. The request is to rezone one lot and amend the comprehensive plan to allow a single-family residence to watch over the other property owned by the petitioners. Petitioners own the remaining lots in this half block. Zoning requirements would allow the construction of a single-family dwelling on the property. With our residential zoning, we have what's called pyramid zoning. So within the R3 zoning district, R2 and R1 uses are permitted. Within the R2 zoning district, R1 uses are permitted. So that's why they're making the request for the R3 zoning in this instance. Okay, background, we'll start with, we're dealing with two separate issues here. One has to do with zoning, and so we'll start with that. In the city code, the purpose for zoning is the city's land use regulations were enacted to promote health, safety, morals, convenience, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the city by lessening congestion in the public rights-of-way, securing safety from fire, panic, and other dangers, providing adequate light and air, preventing the overcrowding of land, avoiding undue concentration of population, facilitating the adequate provisions of transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, and other public requirements, and conserving the value of properties and encouraging the most appropriate use of land. The next section of the city code reads that from and after the effective date of this chapter, the use of all land in every building or portion of a building erected, altered with respect to height and area, added to or relocated in every use within a building or use accessory thereto in the city shall be in conformity with the provisions of this chapter. Then I took two statements from the League of Minnesota Cities. State law authorizes a city zoning ordinance as a tool to implement a comprehensive plan. Zoning is a method of establishing a land use pattern by regulating the way land is used by landowners. A zoning ordinance has area standards that regulate the size and location of buildings and structures in the city. Comprised of text and a map, most zoning ordinances also typically divide a city into various zoning districts and set standards regulating uses in each district. Then the second statement is most zoning ordinances use a map to divide the community into zoning districts that establish similar compatible land uses. By creating zoning districts that separate uses, the city assures that adequate space is provided for each and that transition areas or buffers exist between distinct and incompatible uses. Examples may include but are not limited to residential, commercial, industrial, and agriculture. A little bit of history on the zoning of the property. In a city zoning document dated September 1963, the subject property was zoned commercial. The property was zoned I-1, Planned Industrial District, effective October 1, 1968. And the property was zoned to I-2 on October 21st, 1975, as part of a much larger rezoning in this particular area of the community. In making your decision on the zoning of the property, there are criteria that are to be used for that purpose. Decisions on zoning requests pursuant to Minnesota law as established by Minnesota Supreme Court must be based on consideration of the following criteria. And there are two. Whether the proposed rezoning corrects an error in the original zoning text or map, or whether the proposed rezoning addresses needs arising from a changing condition, trend, or fact affecting the subject property and surrounding area. The rezoning must meet one of those two criteria. Of the two criteria, the proposed rezoning does not correct an error in the original zoning text or map. As a result, this rezoning can only be approved if it addresses a changing condition, trend, or fact affecting the property and surrounding area. A third criteria to be considered following a decision on the first two is whether the proposed rezoning is consistent with achieving the goals and objectives outlined in the comprehensive plan. It is the responsibility of the applicant or petitioner to provide this information to the Planning Commission. Okay, zoning definitions. The definition for the I-2 zone is it's intended to provide a district that will allow general industrial uses which, due to their size and nature, would not conform in the planned industrial district. The requested rezoning to R3, that particular district is intended to provide a district which will allow multifamily dwellings, apartments, row houses, townhouses, etc., in those areas where such developments fit the land use plan, where properly related to other land uses and streets, and where municipal utilities are available. So the consideration regarding the zoning of the property is, does the requested rezoning meet the criteria for a changing condition, trend, or fact? Okay, the second issue relates to the comprehensive plan. Definition of a comprehensive plan is it's an official document adopted by a local unit of government as a policy guide to decisions about the physical development of the community. The plan is intended to be comprehensive, general, and long range. A comprehensive plan is intended to provide an outline for future community development. The plan provides a foundation for land use management and control. History of the plan regarding this particular property. On May 7th, 1996, the city adopted a comprehensive plan. The subject property was designated for business land uses in that plan. On September 4th, 2007, the City Council adopted a revised comprehensive plan, and the subject property was designated for industry land uses in the plan. Would note that, storage buildings are a permitted use in that industry area as well as in the current zoning district. Amendment criteria. This is what we've used in the past when looking for changes in our comprehensive plan. It involve the following. Is it consistent with the comprehensive plan and its goals, objectives, and policies? Does it address the interests and needs of the entire city? Does it address change conditions since the last time the comprehensive plan map or text was amended? Is the subject property suitable for development in general conformance with adjacent land uses and the surrounding development pattern? Are there available municipal services to serve the subject property? And finally, does it demonstrate a public benefit and embrace the public health, safety, and welfare of the city? The comprehensive plan has definitions for the land use areas. For industry, the definition reads as follows. The industry land use refers to a wide range of business primarily oriented to the creation or processing of goods. Examples of such businesses include manufacturing, warehousing, research, and related administrative facilities. Other business, and in parentheses, commercial land uses should only be allowed if they provide needed support to the industrial uses. The city uses zoning regulations to distinguish between types of industrial uses and to guide their location. Current regulations allow two types of industrial zoning districts, and that is I-1 and I-2. Industrial land uses should be located on collector or arterial streets to accommodate traffic from employees and shipping. They should be separated or buffered from residential areas. Now, the definition for high-density residential. High-density residential land uses is intended to provide a space for multi-story apartment and condominium buildings. These areas may also include an integrated mixture of single and multiple story housing types. The land use plan will designate areas with land use services and streets needed to support this additional density. The city will use zoning regulations to control the maximum density of high-density residential. Current zoning regulations allow one type of high-density residential or high-density zoning district, and that's the R3 zone. So the considerations with regards to the comp plan are, does the proposed change generally comply with the identified criteria? And secondly, is this an appropriate location for high-density residential land uses given the surrounding comprehensive plan land use designations? Staff recommendation. Number one, staff would recommend denial of the rezoning request for the following reasons. Number one, the first one, the proposed rezoning does not address the need arising from a changing condition, trend, or fact affecting the subject property and surrounding area. There is no evidence of such change. Number two, attached is a memorandum from City Attorney Roger Hippert, which includes a copy of a memorandum from former City Attorney Hugh Nierengarten on this subject. The city attorney in his memorandum states that he is not aware of any lawful basis for this lot to be rezoned. Secondly, the memorandum from former city attorney Hugh Nierengarten is dated September 11th, 1987, and discusses the need for one of the two conditions to be present in order to rezone a property. The proposed R3 zoning site would adjoin property zoned I2 to the south and east and B2 to the west. It is appropriate to separate your industrial land uses from your residential land uses. The I2 zoning district allows all permitted industrial uses that the city allows. And this includes uses with a greater degree of exterior activities and impacts. So in the I2 zone, you know, that's where New Ulm Steel and Recycling is located. That's where Raiders car lot is located. It's where you can have some exterior activities that aren't compatible with other uses. The rezoning would not be compatible with the current comprehensive plan. I realize that they have requested amendment of the plan. This block of property has been zoned I-1 or I-2 since 1968. This rezoning would be a form of spot zoning. Zoning districts are best separated by lines located in streets, alleys, or railroad rights-of-way. At all costs, we try to avoid using lot lines for that purpose unless we're dealing with fairly large parcels of property. Different zoning districts in the same half block result in different zoning standards for development purposes. And finally, approval would set a precedent that would make it difficult to manage land use in the city. Regarding the comprehensive plan amendment, staff would recommend denial of that request. The request does not address the interests and needs of the entire city. The request does not address the changed conditions since the last time the comprehensive plan map or text was amended. The subject property is not suitable for development in general conformance with most of the adjacent land uses and the surrounding development pattern. There are municipal services to serve subject property. The request does not demonstrate a public benefit and does not embrace the public health, safety, and welfare of the city. In this particular case, the benefit is private. Comprehensive plan boundaries follow city streets and clearly define the industry area. That would not be the case. And finally, the area proposed for the amendment is extremely small and does not warrant a separate comprehensive plan designation. Potential motions are provided to approve and deny the requests. That's both for the rezoning and for the comprehensive plan. Attachments consist of the following. There are rezoning and plan amendment petition with the legal description. Attached to that are 3 aerial photographs of the property, 26 photographs showing residents abutting other land uses within the community, and a zoning map showing areas with multiple zoning. And I guess I'll let the applicant explain those attachments to you. There's the 2007 comprehensive plan. It's a partial land use map identifying the property proposed for amendment. There's a zoning map of the area, it's current zoning map of the entire city. There's a 1973 zoning map of this area, so you can see what it looked like when the zoning change was made to I-1, an aerial photograph of the property, and then the memorandum from City Attorney Hippert, which includes the memorandum from former City Attorney Huebnergarten. That concludes the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, so anyone that wishes to speak on the matter, please step to the mic. State your name and your address for the record.
Arlen Body, 700 North Payne. I guess sounds like they're really not in favor of it, but the one thing I'd like to say is I don't know if everybody's really knowledgeable about what's being built in that area right now. Since the 2007 comprehensive plan was changed, it was changed for a project called the Harmoning First Division. And everything was plotted out in half-lot increments. And since that time, I know Harmoning has sold it off in a lot, some, but they started to build private use buildings for, on all the properties on that area. I understand it's not residential, but there are a lot of people that spend a lot of time and nights at those buildings also. So if you're looking for a buffer zone between industrial and this residential, there is no industrial manufacturing or anything being done like that in the area. I believe it's zoned I-2 back when the tile yard was there, and being that it was done then, it made sense because there was industry and manufacturing being done in the whole area. And by no means is anything like that being done in that area right now. And as for the pictures that we have submitted for this, it was basically just trying to show that there are a lot of places in the city that already have multiple zoned areas and residential areas near businesses and that type of thing. And that's not exactly what we're doing here because we're trying to build a residence next to property that we own. And the R3 zoning was recommended for us to petition to that, even though we're going for one residential house, because the R3 is directly across the street. And it's not like you're putting an island out in the middle of something else and changing one lot in the middle of a big area. It's just being added on to the end of a already zoned area that's R3. So, I guess, anybody got any questions?
Well, the storage building that you're referring to, those are all permitted uses in an industrial zone, correct?
Yes, in their personal use, there's no businesses being run out of them.
Okay. And one of the reasons I remember is for security purposes. Is that part of your
Well, we
reasoning?
were told that that would be a good reason, because we would like to oversee that, but we would like to consolidate our house next to the building that we spend a lot of time at. We have a lot of classic cars and that type of thing, so we spend a lot of time down there. Instead of running from one end of the town to the other, it'd be nice to have our residents there on the site that we own the other lots in that area.
Okay.
Are all four of these buildings on this picture, are you on all of those buildings?
The whole the seven lots that are up on that half block, we own, between me and Sue, we own 5 of them, and the other 2 are owned by my dad.
Anyone else?
I'm gonna ask a question to Dave. Did this come before the council or the planning commission at one time in 1987? That's why we had the letter from Hugh stating on this.
It was a
particular
different
property.
request.
Different request?
Yeah.
A different request on a different property. I provided you with a memorandum, but I understand the request that the property owners have made in their application, but I don't know if everyone on the commission took an oath to uphold the law when you were accepted appointment. I think the law in this case is very clear. There are specific requirements that have to be met before you can agree to rezone. And there's just 2 of them. One is, was there some mistake that was made back in the original zoning or when it was rezoned in the 70s? And no, there clearly isn't. So we're then left with you having to make a factual determination that there's been a change in the character of the neighborhood. And that hasn't even been alleged in the petition. I mean, I think the bodies are very forthright in indicating why they'd like to do this. They want to have it next to their business. That's not a reason to rezone. Anyone can have a foundry or whatever business, and you don't allow residences to be built in industrial areas. That's the whole purpose of zoning. You also have to look at, if this were to be granted, this is permanent. And yes, the bodies would own their residence and they own the storage units, but that could change tomorrow. And then you're going to have somebody who doesn't have any connection with the storage units. Not that that's relevant at all to the issue before you, but that could change. The storage units could get changed. This is zoned industrial. There could be an industry or a business that went in there that was not storage. I understand the convenience to the property owners of not having to drive there, but surveillance, there are surveillance cameras that most businesses use to keep an eye on things that can be addressed through other means. I'm not seeing anything that indicates that the character of the neighborhood has changed. The storage units are consistent, I believe, with I-1, which is something that's allowed in an I-2. So that part of it is being used the way it's supposed to be used. But to follow the law, and the Supreme Court, Hugh pointed out in 1987 what the law was. It hasn't changed in 32 years. There have been decisions from our appellate court since then. It's the same standard. And if you're going to be following the law, I am not seeing any basis that's been presented that would justify the rezoning. The use of other buildings for, as the petitioner has indicated, private use or personal use, that's irrelevant. if it's owned by a business, a corporation or something like that, as long as the use of the property, storage, whether it's storage of this type or storage of some other type, that's allowed. So that's really irrelevant. It all boils down to whether or not there's a change in this neighborhood. And the neighborhood would be the surrounding area. I don't know when the homes across the street were built. That is R3. They look old. I think to the extent that there are other residences located throughout town in a commercial or industrial area, looking at the photos, I have to believe every one of those was grandfathered in. They were built before 68. They've been there, you don't have to move them. So that's something that wasn't done after our zoning law went into effect. So it's your decision. You would need to, as the memorandum indicate, come up with specific reasons how this neighborhood has changed that would justify a decision to rezone. And I have not seen any evidence that's been brought before you that would result in those conclusions being able to be written down and identified.
Dave, in the last 30 years, you guys haven't granted anything? They're all older homes and everything else that he referred to in the pictures?
Oh, in the pictures, I think we researched that, and all of the homes were built prior to 68.
Okay.
What happened is in I think it goes back to 35, the city adopted a zoning ordinance with a zoning map. And that stayed in existence through October 1 of 1968. And we've got a map from 1963. There were 4 zoning classifications that they had. And one of the things that happened starting in the 50s and the 60s is they started using zoning permits to allow uses that weren't compatible, I think, with the actual zoning district. As a matter of fact, we've got one for one of the properties that was in the picture where they allowed a bus garage and a single-family dwelling next to each other. That's dated 1966. And then 2 years later, they rezoned it to the B2? To B2, so the house immediately becomes non-conforming and it's 2 years old. So I think they were issuing so many of these zoning permits that they decided, wait a second, we got a problem here. So then in 1968, that's when they completely redid the zoning map. And in that process, a bunch of dwelling units ended up in areas where they were no longer conforming uses. Same thing happened with some businesses and some industries. They ended up in the wrong locations. And so the idea is that over time, these uses are removed, and then you get uses in those locations that are, compatible with the zoning designation. A good example would be the kind of the Goosetown area, where Gog Sheet Metal is. I mean, within the past 2 years, they have purchased and removed 3 houses from that area. Well, that's an example of, and put in their place a building that's, permitted in an industrial zoning district. So
And that wasn't any rezoning, that was just to make it conform to the use, yeah.
Yeah, so that type of change, takes place, over
I
time.
think the nature, maybe an example of how a neighborhood would change, you've all seen, probably were involved in, the residential development up by the new high school. It was all agricultural land. Over the course of time, the residential areas grew around it, began surrounding some of the tilled acres, and it's just that use it is something that's changed. And those have been periodically then rezoned to residential in different formats. There's no evidence before you that this neighborhood has changed that way. So this hasn't converted to residential. The uses in the area are all permitted uses within the industrial zone. So,
Yeah, I would note that an example of a change would be, when I first started, the bridge across at 20th South Street had just opened. And a decision was made at that time that a lot of the zoning, especially on both sides, that should be changed from industrial to a business classification because of the amount of increased traffic that was gonna be taking place. And so that's why when you look at our zoning map, you can see one block on each side, zone B2, and then it's industrial
it's
beyond
a
that.
corridor that was established.
It was a
there.
corridor.
Yeah.
Another place where we established a corridor was on 7th North Street, where they went 3 lots on each side for commercial uses, and there's still some residents in that area, and there's some commercial uses in that area. So that would be an example.
Those all
of a
happen
change.
as a result of a change.
That's a change.
So
Mr.
there's
Chairman, I
really-
have, oh, go ahead.
So there really is no precedence for a request to change the comprehensive plan like this before, that has been approved. Is that correct?
We've never had a request for a one lot
Okay, thanks.
comprehensive plan change.
Right. And then this is maybe an irrelevant question, but I'll ask it anyway, and you can tell me if it's irrelevant. So I see in different parts of town, storage buildings that have been built that also appear to have living quarters in them. The grills are outside, the chairs are outside, the flower pots are there. It looks like someone maybe has their business there and living there. Is that considered maybe a changing condition or trend? And tell me if it's irrelevant and we'll just let it go.
Well, yeah, the use of storage buildings as residence is not permitted if it's in an industrial zoning district or if it's in a B2 zoning district where we have some storage
And
buildings.
I'm not aware of any of those that's actually used as a residence. I think if people are storing property and they've got some friends down there and they're grilling some burgers while they're working on a car or something, I mean, that's
She
something
might
that's
be
not.
referring to something on German Street, I believe, across kitty corner from New Home Steel up on the top end. Then somebody put an apartment and
It's zoned R2
okay, see, that's.
R3,
or R3.
yeah.
Again, it could be irrelevant.
Yeah.
I just-
I do know for a fact that there are people living in a lot of these storage facilities, like she said. That is happening, and I won't name names, but I think, it's one of those things that's being overlooked. We're just trying to do this above board.
I got a question, Dave. I'm gonna look at the picture here on 1615 North Minnesota. It's not in the picture, but to the left of that house was put up while I was at 3M, and I started there in 72, so sometime after that, just to the left of the house that shows. So was that district, was that a replacement of a house, or if you can fill me in that at all, if you recall that? It was a
cross the alley.
pre-manufactured home that was moved in.
This one?
Yeah, to the left of that would have been a home that was put in after 1972.
No, that home was, that was before 1968 it was built.
The one I'm referring, not this home, what I'm referring to was moved in, it was a prefab type home. And it was assembled while I was working at 3M, and I started there in 72.
So here, if you look at, Rod, if you look at this, is it one of these?
No, this is over, this is the
This
north end
is-
of town by
this
3M.
is-
3M's right over-
Oh, okay,
3M's
I'm sorry,
right
you're
over
not
here.
looking in the
Yeah,
area.
no.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one, yeah.
Yeah.
We're in relationship to,
About over here.
You're talking Mr. Grusendorf's?
I don't know who lives there.
That's the one that he moved in there.
Okay, yeah, it was prefab built in.
that property is zoned R2.
That's
so-
our,
Okay.
so that block is split then?
Well, what happened is originally the property was purchased by the 3M company and they were going to build a parking lot there. And so the property was rezoned for the parking lot and the parking lot never got built and there we sat with.
Actually, they were gonna build a dormitory there for the Sunday people that had come in at midnight, so we were gonna let them stay there.
How did, I guess,
You worked for a different company than they did.
I'm gonna just refer back to next to 3M there, between 3M and the Windings building, we've got a couple fourplexes.
Fourplexes.
And they were pre-68 also. And then I'm gonna refer to, behind the Kegel Club, we've got R3, between industrial there and the warehouse, right off of what, 20th.
You mean the apartment buildings?
Yeah, that would be R3, that's in a,
B1,
that's B1,
yeah,
but we've got the apartment building.
yeah.
So
Just
that
3
was-
apartment buildings,
Help me, but everything you mentioned so far are not in industrial zone. And we're dealing with the issue that is in an industrial zone, am I correct?
I might note that, that we did have, a couple of years ago, someone received a complaint about a residence being located in a storage building, and so we contacted the property owner and said, you can't use it for that purpose, and, they moved out.
And if
So-
we received a complaint,
received
I wasn't
complaints,
aware that this was going on. If we received information that that was actually happening, we would take action on it through the building inspector and or the police department, because you can't be doing that.
Do we have any written requests for or against?
No, received no comments.
So basically, we've got some houses with some storage buildings within our community, or businesses, but, so we've had houses and we've added buildings, or office businesses, but we haven't taken where we've got buildings and added new houses. And it's flip-flop, you know, we've had existing houses and we've added storage sheds, but we've had storage sheds and we haven't brought in a brand-new house, you're saying, basically, in any industrial or B
Never build a
industrial.
residence in a storage shed.
No,
And it's not enough to say that we're gonna try to increase the tax base, or.
That specifically has been determined by the courts to not be a valid reason to rezone. I mean, obviously, there's a policy reason, everyone would like to see a new house and what it would mean for the tax base, but as a grounds to rezone, no. The courts have indicated that is not something you're supposed to consider.
I understand what you said, Roger, as far as, you know, things can change with the properties to the south of that. I guess I would feel differently if they were not owned by the same family. So I don't see that something's gonna drastically change when the whole family owns the whole half block there.
But that could change tomorrow.
It could, but unlikely to.
And I guess the only other changes Arlen brought up is we've got storage sheds now on German Street from what the intended use was at one time, but they're permissible in the I-2.
right.
And that's not enough of a change, you're saying.
It depends how far you want to go back. If you look at it, like I said, it used to be a tile yard down there with manufacturing and full industry. That's a major change from what's happening today. We're going back to 68 and beyond. They were there at that point. I mean, I think that's a pretty valid reason for a major change in the area. It's something to be thought about anyways.
But
That the whole direction of everything is going a different way from manufacturing in the area.
But the property is zoned I-2. And so that's really what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with what's there. We're dealing with what could be there. And that's anything that's permitted in the I-2 zone. And as we well know, buildings over time can change occupants and how the building is used. So, you know, you can't say with 100% certainty that it'll never happen, and you can't say with 100% certainty that it will happen. So you have to really deal with what is that underlying zoning.
Do you have anything else?
No.
Anyone else? Well, if not, then, excuse me, we'll close the public hearing and proceed. Anything? Well, my opinion is we need to follow our comprehensive plan was put in place for the betterment of the city in the long range. And according to Mr. legally, we really can't make a change based on there's not a need of the change of the area. And personally do not recommend ever going to a one lot change for a zone, and especially to put a resident in an industrial zone. Just a bad situation that over time can change, and it could be a year later, it could be 10 years later. But once you make that spot change, you've also made a precedence for the city also. And so my recommendation is to deny the request.
Is that a motion?
No, I'm just making a recommendation. You guys make the motions.
I agree. I think we just don't have what we need to be able to recommend a change.
I would agree also. I mean, I'm all in favor of trying to grow tax base in the city in all capacities. And just the way our current zoning is, it doesn't look like we can merit it at this time.
I'd love to see change, but in this situation, I don't think that we can do anything with it.
And I'm going to assume that from the security standpoint, with the technology today, there's a lot of options available to you, at your residence from wherever you are.
Like I stated, a lot of it was the convenience of it.
Yeah, I understand. So,
There's nothing on the industry that's been empty for how many years, and the only thing that's being built on there are the storage sheds, so it's changing.
But that's where storage sheds belong.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem, that's
I'm just saying, it's changing. They're personal property, they're not storage sheds, those ones down there, they're not storage sheds that are being used for business or whatever, they're just
But you're asking to have it rezoned, and the storage sheds that are there are permitted use in that zone.
I get that, but I'm just saying that this has been, it's an industrial, I get that. There's no industry right now that's interested in it. We've got how many businesses right now in our city that are empty? That who's gonna come in?
Yeah.
How often is the comprehensive plan reviewed?
Well, we had, the first one was done in 93, 94. So
And then
13,
I heard-
14 years.
And revised in '07.
Yeah, but it was a fairly major revision. It was almost like a new plan.
Dave, are you aware of any other cities that have done any rezoning from I-2 to allow R1 or to be permissible upon
Not
like
as a
storage
permitted use, no.
on permitted use? I mean, how do we get to some of these cities now that are allowing like garage condominiums to allow them to be permissible?
That's probably a separate zoning district.
So,
I've been, to be honest with you, I've been, the previous city manager, said that he had run across that. And so I went to a number of locations in Minnesota where I was told those types of, that there were districts for those types of uses, and I couldn't find anything that, where they were allowed. So I'd like to find them, to be honest, so. But there are locations, where garages are built and people stay there.
I think just the anecdotal experience I've had with those are very affluent owners who are parking their Ferraris and Lamborghinis. So it's probably a little different than what we'd see in New Ulm, unfortunately.
Well, that shouldn't make any difference what you have.
yeah.
It shouldn't, but I think it ends up bearing on the type of property they develop.
So down the road, can they apply for this again if we deny this? If there's a reason for change?
Well, we're only making a recommendation.
Recommendation,
Still goes to
exactly.
the
That
council.
goes to city council.
Yeah, as the property owner, they have the right to petition for the zoning of property, for their property.
It sounds like we need a legal argument, right? I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to.
There has to be evidence that would justify.
Not what we want to do, because I think what we want to do is different than.
Right, yeah.
Dave, even if we prove this, they're not gonna build an R3. So they have to, even if we prove, they'd have to come back and say, I'm not gonna
No.
build it. They can build an R1 in an R3?
Now, if you look at the regulations for the R3, a permitted use is what is allowed in the R1 and R2.
Okay.
It says subject as regulated therein, so the regulations in those particular zones then apply.
Okay, understand.
So Dave, considering change with development, and we've got a block and a half there, backside of Applebee's there, the hotel, to German Street to Minnesota Street, sitting vacant as industrial. But say at some time somebody comes and wants to turn that into garage condominiums or that development or that area, is that?
Sure. If
You
we
know.
had that in our zoning ordinance as a
Correct.
permitted use.
So we could come back at someday and with the planning commission and, with research and come up with permitted use.
If that's something that you want to pursue, sure.
I think it might be worthwhile because, in our community, we've got, industries, things have changed and are evolving. And if we aren't looking at change, I don't think we're always moving forward, And if we're saying we've got storage units and, we just offered a storage unit tonight or earlier today, to be built in a single family home, is a unusual lot, in situations, But I think be worth entertaining looking at for the future.
The properties that are vacant in that particular area, I think, are under one ownership.
Correct.
And that, may or may not, be a reason why
Yeah.
there's not more activity, or that maybe a larger user isn't in that area, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at ways of developing within our city, at a later date. But getting back to this issue, at this point in time, it's hard to support it with the way our current zoning is. So,
With an effort to move this along and get a motion on the floor for discussion, I'm gonna recommend denial of the petition of Arlen and Susan Body to rezone I-2 to R3, here's my voice, the property at 1703 South Minnesota Street. Reason for this recommendation are stated in the staff report, see item 1.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Only open for discussion. Any other discussion? I think we'd all like to do something, but one lot in all of this is very complicated to do. And,
without other examples,
Right.
it's,
we're setting a precedence. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Need to take a call on that?
Yeah. Ms. Mako,
I'm sorry.
start
Oh.
with you. We're gonna have a roll call here.
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Piotr,
Aye.
Mr. Bolden,
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Hogan.
aye.
Against?
Motion carries on a 5-1 vote.
Right, the motion, the motion is carried, but it'll go to the city council on September 3rd at 4:30.
Okay, just to clarify, this motion covers both the comprehensive plan
Both.
as well as the rezoning. And the reasons for your motion are the ones that are contained in the staff report.
Correct.
Correct? Okay, thank you.
All right, how do I get back to my agenda here now,
A left arrow up in the left-hand corner. Is that what you got for your screen?
Get up there. I'll make a mic on the phone. Okay, so consider the approval of the preliminary plot of Holco addition.
Okay, just give me a second here.
Well, my voice is gonna
Arlen,
disappear.
just you understood what we talked about before, that even though we're recommending denying it, you still go to the city council and you can present your case again to them.
A different issue though, Ron.
Okay, the applicant, property owner in this particular case, the applicant is John Pullman. The owner is Heiko, a partnership. The legal description will refer you to attachment 5. Street address is 227 First South Street. The deadline for a decision on this request is December 14th, 2019. Comprehensive plan designates this property for industry. Surrounding land uses on all 4 sides, comprehensive plan designates for industry. The zoning is I2. The surrounding zoning on all 4 sides is I2. The current site use, it's vacant. It previously was used for storage by the Hyman Construction Company. Current area uses, Pullman Lumber Company is located to the west. The Hyman Construction Company was formerly located to the south and west. The U.S. Postal Service is located to the northwest. And there are some storage buildings that are located to the east that I believe are owned by the Pullmans. No notice was required in this particular case. The property is generally located north of 3rd South Street, east of South German Street, and south of 1st South Street, and west of South Valley. Property lies between the New Ulm Bike Trail to the west and the Canadian Pacific Railway to the east. Property total is 0.85 acres and will consist of 1 lot. Utilities abutting the property are as follows. The water is located west of the well house, which is located on the west side of Pullman Lumber Company, in front in 1st South Street. Sanitary sewers in 1st South Street. Stormwater runs parallel to the bike trail and is actually, they're located on this property. The comprehensive plan does not designate any park property in this general area. Staff would recommend approval of the preliminary plat with conditions since it complies with code requirements. Conditions are pay the platting fee of $180. That's a base fee of $150 and $30 per lot. Provide an electronic file of the plat in AutoCAD 2000 or newer format, and provide necessary utility easements. Would like to add a 4th, it's not necessarily a condition, but I'd like to have the commission encourage the applicant, in this case Mr. Pullman, to include the property that he owns where those storage buildings are located as part of this plat. And the reason that staff would do that is this property was originally platted as South German Park. And it ran from, in this particular case, 1st South to 3rd South, and then a street came down, and then the park continued. So every legal description for property in this area is a meets and bounds legal description, or it's property that's been platted. So the parcel to the east is meets and bounds, and a meets and bounds legal description is one where you describe the property using distances, using angles and bearings, and they get to be real long and they're cumbersome to use. And whenever there's an opportunity to eliminate a meets and bounds legal description, it's a small triumph. So in this particular case, for little or no cost, with a few more lines, we can get rid of a meets and bounds legal description, which I would like to encourage. Attached, you've got a copy of the preliminary plat, an aerial photograph, a zoning map, ground level photographs, and a legal description.
So how would you like a motion to state that?
Well, it's not a condition, let's just say that it's a notification, or that will send notice to the applicant, so. So we've got 3 conditions and one and a notice that, or communication to the property owner to consider this.
So today we're just hearing, they're asking for a plot, but
Yeah.
say if Mr. Poland owns the property and he comes back and he wants to put storage units in and access it off the bicycle trail or similar that we did on
No.
South Spring Street, that's
Not
not
in this
permissible?
particular case, because
Okay.
this is not a dedicated right of way. In the other case, it was an alley.
Okay, that's
That's
why
why
I'm
it
just,
was
I'm
allowed.
just asking here, I'm just thinking
Yeah.
probably too far ahead, but I'm just seeing undeveloped land and it seems we've got a lot of storage sheds within our community.
It's our growth industry.
I'd make a motion to recommend with the recommendations and the notification as stated.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second recommending approval of the request. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Then we go to the council
Okay,
concerns.
the only item that was considered last month regarding a planning commission recommendation was the address change or no change for Alliance Bank, and the city council approved that unanimously. That was a variance request. That was it.
Okay, anything from the Heritage Preservation?
At the last Heritage Preservation Commission meeting, they did approve the sign for the back entrance to the lamplighter, which I'm assuming they'll probably have up soon, as well as the new Franzen Bank sign that will be on the Minnesota Street side of the building. Those were the recent activities.
All the work going on the center and Broadway on the corner, is that about completed? Isn't that part of the Heritage?
Oh, you're talking about the Brown
Museum?
County Historic
The bank or
Society.
whatever, post office, the old post office building, or whatever you wanna call it, so.
That's, I think, some tuck pointing that's
Right.
taking place there.
But it's been going on all summer. I mean,
Yeah,
are they
it's been
starting
going
to,
on for a long time. Yeah, I believe they're probably nearing completion.
On this side.
Yeah,
On that
I-
side. They've got
no,
multiple
I
phases.
understand that they have a multi-year plan of
Okay.
restoration, and, yeah, they need, and they've been using state funding to make these improvements, and that they will be doing so. Again, in the future, hopefully they'll secure money that way.
okay. Anything from the commission members? If not, we have no further business, the meeting adjourned.
Like the new format.